So this is a very informal conversation, Chris, as you and I discussed. Chris and I met as Davidson alums when he became the AD in 2018 at Davidson. I'm going to let you kind of share more in detail your background. The highlights. Was a basketball athlete at Davidson, student athlete. We say student athlete, we mean it there. And then worked with the NBA, played professionally, got his master's at Columbia, and is now back serving as AD. Chris, I'm going to throw the ball over to you and let you kind of share more about your background, and then we'll kind of get into some Q&A.
Sure. Thanks, Jenna, and good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure to see you all over Zoom. So as Jenna said, I am a 2006 graduate of Davidson, walked on and came on a full academic ride and walked on the basketball team, played 4 years. When I graduated, I was really fortunate enough to receive a fellowship called the Watson Fellowship. The Watson Consortium is made up of about 50 small liberal arts schools. They give 50 graduating seniors, at the time it was 25,000. I think now it's up to 35,000, to do whatever you want, right? Just travel the world, do whatever the heck you want, right? So people have looked at salsa dancing in Latin America, boat building in Asia. Somebody's project looked at the history of bread. Somebody studied Madonna's influence on pop culture in Europe. Just crazy projects. They give you the money. You can't step foot back in the U.S. for a year. And that for me was a big launching pad. I was a political science major, Spanish minor, focused on international politics, and I played basketball. So I combined all of those, and I spent a year in Japan, Argentina, South Africa, and Italy doing different basketball projects. Each country was kind of a different case study in how basketball was used to impact different cultures and how it was used in different ways. Came back, and I was fortunate enough to land a job with the Spurs on the business side. Wanted to get in on the basketball side, but we're talking 2007. It's the Spurs. 2007. They're coming off of an NBA championship. They're one of the best organizations in the world, and was fortunate enough to get a job on the business side. Coached freshman, 8th grade, high school, and JV side. And 6 months into that opportunity fellowship abroad really became a job, because I ended up getting a job in international basketball operations with the NBA. One of the highlight programs I ran during my 10 years there was Basketball Without Borders. It's the NBA's global development basketball initiative. It really is a part of a recruiting tool, but really life skills and development as well. They've got over 60 kids that have come through that camp now that have made it to the NBA. You're talking Joel Embiid, Pascal Siakam, Gorgui Dieng, Marc Gasol, Ricky Rubio. The list goes on and on. And so that program for me was a big part of my development at the NBA. And for the last 3 years, in addition to the Basketball Without Borders, I oversaw NBA Draft Combine. So everything related to the entire combine, selecting players, soliciting ballots from the teams, putting together schedule, all of the strength and conditioning protocol that we did in Chicago every year, all of the medical protocol, all of the team interviews, any marketing activations, et cetera. And then also ran basketball operations for All-Star Weekend. So same thing there. All starters are selected on. We ran the ballots for the reserves. We figured out the rookie soft game, picked the dunk contest participants. Whenever the dunk contest went well, I was first in line to be like, yeah, that was us. And whenever it sucked, I was like, I don't know who picked the dunk contest participants. 3-point shooters, everybody. So ran it from A to Z, from the moment all stars and participants stepped foot in whatever city we were in. We managed everything to the moment they got on their flight home. And so really had some incredible experiences combined with, the international stuff, along with the large marquee events on Combine and All-Star side. And had no intentions really of ever becoming an AD. I went back to Columbia and got a master's degree, specifically to fill in the gaps in kind of the statistics and analytics side. The NBA was just moving at that time, 2012, more in that direction. And I felt it was important, if I wanted to make a jump to a team one day, to whether it's the collective bargaining agreement, whether it's understanding how analytics fit into the game. And so I went back to school to kind of fill in the gaps that I felt like I needed. The former AD left in 2018. I didn't even give it one thought. I actually recommended somebody else for the job. And that person turned around and said, you really got to take a hard look at it. Thought about it some more, talked to some folks. And that's when I decided to throw my hat in the ring, and was fortunate enough to get the job to come back and serve as AD at my alma mater, which not many folks get to do. So in my third year now here at Davidson, it's been great. Obviously, what everybody's dealing with, COVID aside, but still plugging away and trying to make headway within our mission and our goals and vision that we've established for athletics. So I'll leave that as an introduction, Jen. I didn't want to leave time for just conversation and questions, and go from there.
Yeah, well, thank you again for being here. I think that's just, guys, we're in for a treat. And so I'll start with a question, and this is probably one that you get a lot, but I think still worth asking since this is a leadership class. What's it like now being your former head coach's boss?
It's part of the reason I took the job. Playing for Bob McKillop was great. He had such a huge impact on me and so many other people. Obviously, our famous alum, Steph Curry, and what he did for our school, putting us on the map. I take full credit for Steph. My class recruited Steph. So I was a senior at Davidson when he was a senior in high school. And so we take all the credit in the world. We equate Davidson basketball as kind of BS and AS, before Steph and after Steph. And my class was literally BS. We were the last class before Steph. Made it to the tournament our senior year. Nobody remembers, because as soon as Steph got there, it was all Steph. But it's been interesting. I always had a good relationship with Bob, and he was one of my biggest advocates. When I first put my name in the hat for the job, he's the first person I called. I didn't do it before talking with him. Just knowing what he means to the institution, I wanted to make sure he was on board and supportive, and he completely was. And so hardest part has been calling him Bob instead of coach. I called him coach for so many years, and now it's just Bob.
And guys, if y'all aren't familiar with Bob McKillop's body of work, you should definitely check him out. He is a leader worth following. And yeah, Chris, I hear you. Like whenever I introduce myself to a group for the first time, I'm like, hi, I'm Jana. I went to Davidson. No, I don't know Steph Curry. Like, it's just all kind of one statement in one breath. So, all right, we have some questions from the crowd. I'm going to try to not talk. We're going to go Tom, then Shimmy, then Marcus.
Hey, Chris, thanks for showing up and giving us your time. So I looked at your history a little bit, and it looks like you were on the Spurs and Popovich. You were just talking about your current coach, at Davidson. What did you learn from Popovich, and what kind of parallels do you think moving from the NBA and maybe the NBA front office into the AD, and what are similarities or things that you used in both situations?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, you look at the Spurs and Popovich, and really RC. I've gotten really close with RC as well over the years. He was actually he helped recommend me for this AD job. He was one of my the folks that I kind of put in my pocket. So honestly, you look at the Spurs, it's really based on culture. You talk about the Spurs tree and what they've been able to do for so many years. I think this past year was the first year they make the playoffs in some absurd amount of time. And so the culture that they've established, it doesn't matter who you have coming in. Obviously, having a Tim Duncan and Tony Parker and Manu and David Robinson before that, and having those high quality character guys is important. But the culture that they established and the system that they built to be able to plug folks in, that's why Kawhi Leonard was so impactful there for a short amount of time he was there. If you don't have your core foundation at the very sort of crux of what you're doing, it's not going to be successful. I think I saw that across the NBA. I saw that in the NBA. I think the NBA league office is one of the best professional sports leagues in the world. You look at how they've handled everything from I was at the NBA when Donald Sterling got kicked out of the league, right? Racial, social justice, LGBTQ issues, kneeling. Like, the NBA has been at the forefront and have a core foundation around respect and equity and inclusivity, such that people are always scrambling when things happen. And the NBA is never scrambling because they're already doing the work, right? Other leagues are scrambling to figure out how to react. But when your core foundations are built upon a set of values and you're living it day in and day out, you're never scrambling. You're just sort of, you've already done the work, and your body of work sort of positions you for how to move forward. And so that really comes down to culture. That's what I tried to establish when I came back to Davidson. The first year I really focused on values. Our core values are consistency, accountability, teamwork, success. CATS, right? Everybody loves simplifying things. And so we talk about consistency, what we do on a day in, day out basis. The fact that our standards of excellence do not change. We compete at the highest level athletically and sacrifice nothing in the classroom. There are a lot of institutions that compete at the highest level athletically and sacrifice academically. There are a lot of institutions that compete at the highest level academically and sacrifice athletically, right? So we don't do either. The accountability is something we talk about every day. Holding people accountable and being vulnerable, right? When you make a mistake, owning up to it. Teamwork, obviously, not just being a team, but being an ambassador for your program and understanding that the Davidson across your chest, you're always representing your team, your program, and the success, and across athletics, academics, and community leadership service, whatever it is. And we always fall back on that, right? Our coaches are ranked, are evaluated within those values, right? Like everything is around sort of your core values. Our mission is athletics done right. We think we do athletics the right way. We are scholar athletes to a core, and compete at the Division I level. Our peers are all Division III. All the peers that we're sort of up against, Swarthmore, Haverford, Bowdoin, like there's nobody 2,000. There are not many 2,000 student Division I institutions that are liberal arts, kind of doing what we're doing, and we're trying to do things the right way. And so that foundation, that culture, is really permeates everything that we do, and everything from there is built on that. So you see that with the Spurs, you see that across the NBA, you see that with a number of the good teams have that, right? The great teams have that, and that's what I've tried to sort of learn from and help transition even to Davidson today.
Thank you very much. And yeah, everybody loves acronyms, right?
Yeah, no doubt. If you get a good one, it's you just fall back on that and keep it moving.
Hi, Chris. Thank you for joining us. I'm Shimmy Gray Miller. I'm actually an assistant here at Clemson with the women's basketball team. Can you talk more about values? When you got there, you already had coaches that were in place. How did you go about making sure that their values and the values they had for their program were in alignment with your values? And if they weren't, how did you reconcile that when you first got hired?
So it's a great question. One of the hardest things that I but one of my challenges was, I mean, I'm a relatively young, I was one of the youngest ADs when I took the job. And so Davidson has a history. People are here forever. People are here for a long time. So I was kind of put in a position where I was now leading the people that used to lead me, right? Like my right-hand guy, Jenna, Scott Applegate, he's still here. He was my head athletic trainer when I was a freshman. And Beth Hayford is still here. And people have been here for 15, 20 years, and you're now sort of put in that position, and coaches are still here as well. And so I think just listening and understanding that, of course, I had a vision for Davidson Athletics and where we could go. Listening and understanding where our administrators were, where our coaches were. I think it's important, Shimmy, like Bob McKillop in men's basketball has trust, commitment, care, and it's not going anywhere. I've got it tattooed on my arm, right? Like our teams have had their individual core values for years, right? We have a relatively new football pro coach, Scott Abel, who's turned the program around. They've won more games in the past 2 seasons than they had the previous 10. And his thing is we win everywhere with everyone, win everywhere with everyone, and win everything, right? Women's soccer is unity, gratitude, excellence, right? So it's like every team has their core values. And my goal was to say, hey, look, that's not going anywhere. This is what we have for Davidson Athletics. You could point individually, team by team, and know what each team was about, but we didn't have that connector, right? And so my goal was to create something around CATS that said, hey, this is what Davidson Athletics is about, and that falls within it. And so it was really having conversations with our team such that you do you, right? Like, I trust you to create your program and create your mission and your foundation. And it's going to tie in and lead into what we're doing as an athletic department. One of the big things that we have to sort of face here at Davidson is, we don't want athletics to be separate from the institution. Athletics is driving the institutional mission. Our president, and she's the biggest sports fan we have, believes that there's an educational value in athletics. We all know that. We all believe that, right? You're better for playing on a team. You're better for competing. And so making sure that athletics is a part of the institutional mission and not separate, not seen as its own entity. Everything we're doing, our core values around Davidson, around leadership, service, and having disproportionate impact on the world. We tie athletics to that. And then we tie everything that our teams do to Cats and to the institutional mission. So it's alignment all the way from the top. And so they see that, they see it clearly. I mentioned on the performance evaluations, when you see it and hear it every single day, it becomes easier to manifest itself. And our kids know it. They hear us talk about it every single day. And so I think it's listening. I think it's giving coaches the ability to create their own values and understand that we're all sort of pushing for the same thing. And then the greater alignment you can have with the institution, because part of it is out of necessity. Like, you just need to have relationships across campus, right? Because there's going to be times you need to, I mean, I'm working right now. Our men's basketball team has to play the Maui. This is nothing is more 2020 than this. We're in the Maui Invitational for the first time ever. And the Maui Invitational is now going to be held in Asheville. If that doesn't sort of encapsulate 2020, I don't know what is. But they moved the dates now to November 30th to December 2nd. And we always create our schedules around exams. Now, college basketball season's pushed back 15 days. They moved the MTE, and we're literally playing our exam schedules December 1st to 8th. We're playing on the 1st and 2nd. We can't have our kids playing exams. It's just not going to happen. So I had an hour-long conversation with academic affairs and dean of faculty about extending the exam period, 2 days for our men's basketball team. But I feel like that conversation's easier because I've already done the work of establishing the relationship and being like, hey, we're partners, we're here. So that alignment across the board with your coaches, with your programs, and even across campus is critically important, such that your values, their values, there's some synergy in what you're trying to do.
Did you get the 2-day extension?
I'm not yet. I asked for it yesterday. I'm still waiting to hear back.
I want to know. So guys, just, at Davidson, they give you like a 5-day period, 6-day period, and it's self-scheduled exams. So you can go and choose the exam you want to take when you want to take it. So it's a little different in a lot of ways, but that's one of them. All right, Marcus and then Evan.
Good afternoon, Chris. Thank you for, coming and spending your time with us. I greatly appreciate it. I know you're a very busy individual. My question is really a 2-part question. The first one is, how difficult is it as a Black man to be in administration, specifically in sports administration at the college level? And then what advice would you give a young professional such as myself who is attempting to break into, administration at the sports level?
Yeah, it's a great question. I tell folks, especially this past year with the heightened sensitivities around racial and social justice, and even how that ties into COVID, it's hard being an AD, right? Just because of everything we have to do right now. I mean, we're literally going day by day, especially with COVID, just around trying to keep our case count low. We've got 1,500 students on campus. We're testing kids once a week. It's like, it literally is day by day. So it's hard being an AD, period. It is much harder right now, even being a Black AD. I think especially around the racial and social justice piece, you're not just trying to help facilitate conversations and empower people, you're kind of living it at the same time. And so we're also a resource-strapped institution, right? Like, I don't have a diversity, equity, inclusion officer in athletics, right? So that makes me the de facto diversity, equity, inclusion officer until otherwise told. I talked before about doing the work such that you're not scrambling when the time comes. I did not do a good enough job doing the work on the DEI front, such that when everything kind of hit in kind of, April, May, and you talk about George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery, we were scrambling. And part of that, and I take the onus on that. We talked about diversity, equity, inclusion. We talked about standing up for these things. But if you're only paying it lip service and it's not grounded in your values and foundation, when the time comes, and the time came such that Davidson's trying to put out statements, our teams are trying to put out statements of support and solidarity and Black squares on Instagram, whatever. And it's like, people are like, oh, that's great. And then they kind of turn their eye internally and they're like, well, have you always sort of stood up for these things, in your history? Has the baseball team has had some incidents and other programs, and so that eye kind of turns on you, and you start to realize you're not really living out your values, right? And so one of the first things I've had to do is really create a diversity, equity, inclusion initiative. We never had one, right? And we have a call to action around education and culture and community outreach, right? Our teams have been tasked from April up through now and for the entire year with podcasts and books and movies and conversations and culture is around. Some teams are mandating that every person on the team has to take at least 2 Africana studies classes during their time at Davidson, right? Community outreach. What are you doing? We've had Kellen Grady, one of our star basketball players, created an initiative, College Athletes for Respect and Equality. Our football team has a new initiative, PACE, to fight social injustice. But one of our men's soccer players created a SPE, Safer Police Encounters, right? So like providing that space and medium for our scholar athletes to step into that activism space and really understand that you have to do the work, and then making it part of our core foundations. That has been a task, and it's much more difficult when you're Black, because I feel like you're also living it. And folks are also like, are you doing this potentially because you are a person of color? I'm also coming on the heels of somebody who's here for 23 years, and he did a fantastic job, but this was not a priority, right? I've got 7 people of color on my staff as a whole, of a staff of around 100, right? So we're working from behind. Our institution just put together a commission on race and slavery, just finished 2 years and just put out a report. And we're now sort of having to come with a reckoning, right? The fact that created by slave owners, right? And they're talking about renaming buildings. It's happening across the country, right? And so I think it's not unique to us. I think it's much more challenging for people of color in these leadership positions to find the balance, to make sure people feel empowered and feel empowered to speak in uncomfortable situations and tough conversations, to ground the work that needs to be done in your foundation. Again, I talk about athletics done right. That diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative is now a part of that, right? Like doing athletics right is not just academics, athletics, and championships, whatever. It is doing the work around, are we truly diverse? Are we equitable? Not just equal, but are we equitable? Are we really being inclusive? We haven't ascribed to the coaching the coaching document that's going around the Rooney Rule, because we're doing it right now, right? And we're trying to do the work. And so I think it's much more difficult for leaders of color in this time. To your second question, I think there's a lot of work being done. I'm sure you, Marcus, you may have seen there's a Black AD Alliance that was formed. Division I directors of athletics, and we meet pretty much weekly, every week at 8 p.m. There's a pipeline, there's a recruitment task force. I'm actually on the social justice task force. There's work being done to establish pipelines and databases and really provide more opportunities. Every AD job that's open now, like we're almost like a informal search firm, right? And we're talking like Gene Smith at Ohio State, and Alan Green at Auburn, and all the heavy hitters, people of color, Carl Williams at Virginia, and being more advocating for more people of color across these positions, advocating for more opportunities, advocating for more intentionality. And so for you, I think it's developing relationships. It's having conversations. It's asking questions. It's trying to figure out what more you can do to step into that space. I also, for me, it's unique. I gave you my background. I didn't come in a traditional path, right? I wasn't an administrator. I wasn't, in development or in athletic communications or in operations and work my way in. I came as a complete outsider. So I'm still, Marcus, learning how folks kind of get engaged. I think NACTA is a big part of that. I think different workshops across collegiate athletics that are put together are continuing to focus on providing more opportunities. And so I think that world is continued to expand. And I think now is the right time for people of color to step into that space, because there is greater intentionality and focus being put on providing more equitable opportunities across the board.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
All right, Evan, Meredith, and then Joe.
Hey, Chris, how's it going? Thank you for being here. Kind of what Marcus was going off of. I just wanted to ask you for, I also want to be athletic director someday, but what is some advice you would probably give me to try to help me get to my career path where you are right now?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I've learned so far is the job. I kind of break it into a pizza pie. And each piece of the job is a different slice, and each slice is a little bit bigger or smaller depending on the time of year or depending on just what's going on, right? So the big slice right now is COVID, day to day, just having to deal with everything related to COVID, right? To just make sure we can keep our doors open, our lights on, and keep people on campus. But the job is really multifaceted, even more so than my time at the NBA, right? Because I was focused on in the NBA, you're focused on the NBA, you're focused on developing relationships with teams, with players, international players, scouts, agents, personnel, team personnel. And it's different here, right? Our constituents are scholar athletes, coaches, fans, donors, alums, parents, and each pizza slice is different, right? So misconduct, administration, fundraising. I had no fundraising experience. I had increased budgets. I'd gone to Adam Silver and said, hey, can we get more funding for this camp or this development camp overseas, whatever, but I'd never like fundraised, right? So understanding what fundraising and stewardship means, understanding the NCAA side, right? So now I sit on the men's basketball rules committee with the NCAA, and I sit on the A10 COVID medical advisory committee and the Alston work subcommittee around name, image, likeness, and pay to play. So understanding the NCAA and the A10 conference side. So and I think understanding each slice of the pie that goes into athletic administration, of which I'm still learning, and then trying to figure out connection points, right? So how can you get experience in that world? I think one of the things I'm going to try to start doing more is exposing some of my younger staff to conference meetings, right? Obviously, it's a little bit easier on Zoom, but even when we get back to traveling in person and just getting them inside the room where it happens, right? I think it's if you're in a certain space, trying to understand how to get experience in other areas, either horizontally or vertically, right? So you're not pigeonholed into one specific area, whether it's operations. Understanding more about the entire facet of athletic administration is critically important, and pushing those folks that your direct reports to provide those opportunities. It's a tough conversation in the very beginning. If the folks that you're working with know clearly what your intentions and ambitions are, and the fact that, look, you're not looking to just jump ship. You're a hard worker and you're committed to what you're doing, but you also have bigger aspirations. They should feel a shared ownership in your development and help provide and cultivate and create those opportunities as well. So I think it's a greater intentionality about doing the research. What areas interest you? How can you get that where you are right now? If not, what things do you need to be involved in? What professional development opportunities can you get involved in? Is there funding for that? And so trying to look at sort of the full spectrum and pushing for those opportunities in whatever space that you can. It's a lot. I'm still learning. I benefited from the fact that I knew Davidson. I just didn't know the job. Like, I knew Davidson, I knew the people, but I'm learning the job every single day. And so I think just fully understanding what that pizza pie looks like and try to start, biting all slices as much as you can to get that experience.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Go ahead, Meredith.
Hey, Chris. So I want to know who has helped influence you the most into your role as a leader. I know with your basketball experience, leadership is really important, and then kind of stepping up into the role that you are now, who helped influence you the most?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I've had a couple great mentors. When I was at Davidson, I mentioned I was on a full academic scholarship. It was called the William Holt Terry Scholarship. Former Dean of Students, William Terry, had this scholarship program, and he, for me, was one of my closest friends and mentors. And it was a leadership program, right? So he brought in speakers from all around the country and the world, even, to come and talk to the students in the program and just challenge us on different leadership opportunities and mindsets. The president of Duke Energy, a North Carolina state senator, just people from all different walks of life. And you almost come up with case studies in leadership, right? In vulnerability, in accountability, and all the different things that you're going to face in crisis. So he, for me, was a big influence on my life. I worked for Kim Bahuni at the NBA for 10 years. Kim, she's one of those people that people don't probably know the name. She's going to go into the Naismith Hall of Fame pretty soon. She's behind everything that David Stern did for international basketball. So there was David Stern that helped with the NBA globalization, but Kim's the one like that was like on the ground doing the work. Like she helped put together the dream team in '92. There's a famous picture of Charles Barkley in like a pink jumpsuit walking in Las Ramblas in Barcelona, and there's a blonde woman like steps behind, like that's Kim, right? Like she is the godmother of international basketball. And one of the things that the way that she led was through building relationships. She always had a glass of white wine. Like she was so non-traditional. Everything was done like bring people together, like build relationships. We would travel the country, meeting with teams, meeting with team personnel, and we just take them out to dinner and just build relationships and just listen to people, help have them tell their stories. You build trust, build accountability, and she treated people like family, right? So that idea of shared ownership, and that idea of psychological safety, right? Like people need to feel confident that you have your back, like people have your back, and that you can speak your mind without repercussion. Psychological safety is huge, and it's one thing I learned from Kim because she always empowered me to speak my mind, and to push back, right, in a respectful way. And so I always try to create that even now with my staff, my senior staff, with our entire administration. I want to hear from you. One of the most things I say the most is, I don't know if I don't know, right? If there are things that are on your mind and things like I can't be everywhere at once. I know a little bit about a lot. I don't know a lot about a little bit. And so people need to feel the empowered to speak up, and that you're going to have their back. You always give them the benefit of the doubt until you can't, and you support them in everything that they're doing. And so I'd say Will, Terry, I'd say Kim. I've had a lot of great conversations with, and I think it was Tom. You asked the question about the Spurs. RC Buford's been huge for me. Quick story. RC, when I tried to get the job with the Spurs, I wore him out, man. I mean, I was a 22-year-old, 23-year-old kid coming off that international fellowship. I thought I was like on fire, right? Like I said, man, I can be a scout. I can do this. And he sent me one of the most scathing emails that put me in my place. Was like, how are you telling me what you should do for the Spurs? Like, where do you get off telling me that you should be in player personnel? And it humbled me to my core. And it wasn't that I was an arrogant or brash person. I was just very confident and just felt like I felt a year for me felt like 5 years. I felt like I put in the work. I hadn't done shit. Pardon my language. Sorry, Jana. The little ones on the yes, my fault. But I hadn't done anything, right? And so I think understanding what real work is, what putting the time is in, what it really means, and that experience is great, but you got to have a body of work, right, in order to sort of be able to move forward. And RC really helped me understand. Everybody in his organization started as interns. They start in the laundry room, right? And you look at where people are today, from Sam Presti to Dennis Lindsay with the Jazz, to right, like they all started similar to Eric Spoelstra with the Heat. They showed photos of him during the finals, like in the video room, right? Just and RC really helped me understand it doesn't matter where you've been or what you do, like you've got to start at the bottom, and helping people understand that. And it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not instantaneous. You have to combine preparation with opportunity. I feel like Dean Smith said that, and I've really taken that to heart. Some people are prepared and always, but never get the opportunity. Some people get the opportunity, but are not prepared. And you've got to be both, and at all time, and seek out opportunities. And there's a lot of luck there as well. And so those three for me, in addition to my parents, I love my folks. They always set through that foundation for me, of course. But I'd say Will Terry, Kim Bahuni, and RC Buford.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, guys, we'll get into psych safety when you take sports psych if you haven't already. If you do want to learn more about it, it is the most important thing in establishing culture. But there's a book, Culture Code by Daniel Coyle, and then also Amy Edmondson's work. But I have a ton of podcasts, so if you want it, message me and I'll get that to you. We had Joe next, right?
Oh, yes, ma'am. Hey, sir, what's your role of building relationships with the student athletes you have, current and future? And what's your role in the recruiting process overall? Do coaches want you involved in the recruiting process, or are they kind of like, hey, let me do my thing, run my show, and if I need you, I'll ask you to come in?
I'll answer your last question first. It's the latter. I call myself the closer. They bring me in when they need to close the deal. I'm like 15 of 16. I think I lost one. Shoot, you know what? It might have been the Clemson. Good Lord, man. But I'm not kidding, actually. I think it was. but yeah, I let them do their thing. When they have kids coming in on official, unofficial, sometimes they'll grab me. Hey, come meet somebody, meet the parents. Sometimes it'll be organized. I'm on the actual itinerary and they come in my office and I meet with them. So I leave it up to coaches. I don't push them. I trust them. They're the experts, but I let them know, don't hesitate to reach out because I like to do it. I want to do it. I think as an alum, as a former scholar athlete, now as an AD, I have a unique perspective about what Davidson was, where it is, and where it's going. And that's kind of my selling point of, if you're in the stock market, buy Davidson now, because I think we're just kind of on the cusp of where we're trying to go. So I use that a lot in my recruiting pitch. From a scholar athlete relationship perspective, I am all about building relationships. It's gotten more difficult in COVID. A lot more meetings I'm taking outside and masked up, whatever. But I have tried to be as visible, and I almost burnt myself out in the first couple years, just trying to get to every game, every match, every competition. I just wanted them to see me. I wanted them to know I was there. I'm talking to parents in the stands. So I'm very visible, and I talk to scholar athletes a lot. I email them probably at least once a week on something. We're doing, again, I mentioned diversity, equity, inclusion training right now. It's mandatory. I sit in on those trainings Friday night, 6:45 to 9. I'm like, look, if I'm going to have y'all do it, I'm doing it as well. I've done 2 with them. I've got another one this coming Friday for the last third of our scholar athletes. They reach out to me often. I had somebody reach out to me. I had a meeting with them on Friday about some mental health stuff. Some folks reach out to me on social activism and some ideas and thoughts. And so I have an open door policy. Being a small community helps because it doesn't feel like there's a huge disconnect. But I'm as visible and transparent and sort of open as possible with scholar athletes. So I want them to know that I'm here. I want them to know that my door is always open, and I always take meetings as much as possible when I can. So they know that it's again, I sell them on the fact that I was here, I was in their shoes, and I would want that for me, right? People in positions of power to make me feel supported and that their voices could be heard. So I try to provide that as much as possible.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, Annie, and then CJ and Matt.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for being here. I just had a question about, you're in a unique position of leading a bunch of leaders as coaches. I think I'm currently an assistant coach at a Division III school, so I get the academic rigor part of it. But what are you doing to help develop your coaches into better leaders, and the same for the student athletes?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think part of it's twofold. I told our coaches, I said, there are some things kind of in your world, professional development wise, that I just don't know of. You have to get to bring that to me and I'll support it, right? So whether it's through NACTA or through different organizations or coaching associations, whatever it is, if there are opportunities for you to get better personally, professionally, let me know. We will always support professional development. So they know that they have a lifeline around that, and they have resources dedicated to that at any time. So that's number one. Number two, I think I've tried to be pretty intentional about exposing our entire administration to just different facets of leadership. So that hopefully lead to professional development. We have a kickoff meeting every year. I had James Borrego, head coach of the Charlotte Hornets, who I've known forever, just come and talk about his leadership style. Jay Triano, former NBA coach. I use a lot of my former NBA guys just to come and talk. We've got a former Davidson football player, Sean Tyrants, who's now the team clinician for the Kansas City Chiefs. He's their mental health counselor. He came and talked to our coaches, or via Zoom, I should say, just to talk about mental health and warning signs and best practices. And so every so often, if it's once a month, at least once every couple months, and it doesn't have to be long. It's half an hour. Everybody's busy, but just try to continually put things in their mind to get them out of the day-to-day practice with their scholar athletes, et cetera, to think big picture. I literally have a Post-it note on my desk, big picture, that's literally on my desktop, and to help them think about it every single day, because sometimes they get so provincial and narrow-minded and they don't see the full spectrum of why are we doing what we're doing at a macro level. And so I use those conversations to help them think and also bring back to the basics, right? Our core values, your core values, what are we here for? It's not for us, it's for the scholar athletes. And so I try to think through that every month, every couple of months, to try to expose our staff to those opportunities. Same with scholar athletes. It's hard because they're so busy, and especially now, it's harder because it's harder to build community through COVID. Like, we just have such strict rules and protocols. Like, you got to wear a mask. The only time I'm not wearing a mask is when I'm in my office right now. Even when we're outside, we're wearing masks. Our policies are crazy, but they're working. So it's harder to create those opportunities for scholar athletes. You try not to do as much right now on Zoom because they're zoomed out. Their classes are partly in person, partly remote. So more often than not, you try to get people in person, but that's difficult. So that's become a little trickier, especially now. I think in a normal time period, we have speakers on campus. We connect through the institution on speakers that they bring. We had Brian Stevenson from the Equal Justice Initiative come and speak this past year. We are going to have, hopefully, before Election Day, 2 local representatives through our voting initiative on campus that are up for city council come and speak, both on the Democratic and Republican side. So again, just exposing them to voter education and local state races. So we try to implement that as well from a professional development and just from a societal awareness perspective, cultural awareness perspective as well, so that it's not all athletics all the time.
Hey, Chris, thank you for joining me. I kind of got like 2 questions. One, I know you mentioned this your 3rd season there at Davidson. So when you first got back, how did people view you from that former student player to now as the athletic director? Because I know how it can be when you go back to campus. As you said, a lot of people still been in position for so long, they can still see you as the student athlete. So how was that transition for you when you first started back? And then my second one, I think you mentioned that the person before you held that position for 23 years. So how was it from other people view? How was they able to transition to the visions and the core principles that you had, considering that they'd have been with someone that had been there for 23 years?
Yeah, no, great question. So I think the transition was good. Again, I mentioned leading the people that used to lead me. I had great relationships with those folks, and I had a good body of work. Right, I'd put in the time with the NBA, and so coming from that world, and I think a fresh perspective helped as well. Again, I mentioned I didn't come up through the ranks. I wasn't a deputy associate AD at another school or somewhere. So bringing a different perspective, I don't think I don't think it was a crutch, CJ, in terms of them seeing me as a former scholar athlete. I think it helped me from the sense of I knew what it meant to be part of the Davidson athletics program, right? I went through it. I understand the value of athletics and academics, the push and pull. I understood the resources and constraints of a small school, financially and otherwise, right? I understood the critical need for fundraising, and so I think it was more a benefit than a detraction. In all honesty, I wasn't viewed as sort of just the former scholar athlete. I was viewed as somebody who intimately knew the place, needed to kind of learn the business, but was able to listen and develop relationships to help move things forward. The second question, I think how to get people to buy in. I think it wasn't hard. I think also I mentioned the idea of creating shared ownership. I think before I had ideas, I had a mission, I had a vision, but you listen to folks and then what's important to them. I think my predecessor was great. He was here for 23 years. He just wasn't as bold as I am. I preach the balance of confidence and humility. I think we're too humble as an institution. We don't talk about ourselves enough. Part of it's our Presbyterian ties, probably. We just don't talk about ourselves enough. And part of it is just this Goliath, David sort of mentality. We always see ourselves as David and the underdog and the overachiever. And I sort of tried to bring a different spin of greater confidence. I literally, every presentation I give, I have a photo of Muhammad Ali standing over Sonny Liston. And I say, we do not want to be the University of Muhammad Ali. He's a little too brass, a little too cocky, a little too arrogant, although Muhammad Ali was great. But we for damn sure don't want to be Sonny Liston, right? Like on our backs, because he's literally looking up after he got knocked out, underselling ourselves, selling ourselves short. We need to live somewhere in the middle, right? Like that's confidence and humility. And so for me, I think selling folks on a vision that people thought might have been possible, but didn't necessarily have the impetus from the top to step into that space. We've been doing more with less for forever, and I'm trying to push to do more with more. And so I think the idea, the vision that we had, folks for a while had wanted to sort of move in this direction. And so stepping in and having them come on board and support it wasn't as difficult as I may have thought or imagined it might have been. I think part of it was, hey, we've been thinking about these things for a while, and all right, let's push that to the forward. I never want to hear this is the way it's always been done. Like, think differently, think creatively. Don't just innovate to innovate, but innovate to create value. And so we've been really successful in that space. Folks actually feeling like, all right, like, we may have felt this way before, but now we have the space to pursue it. Now we have the space to try creative ideas. Now we have the space to think a little bit bigger from that perspective. So it definitely was a shift. It was a shift. Our administration now is definitely different from what we've done the previous 3 years. 23 years.
I can see a difference just not even being there. So I'm, as an alum, very thankful for your leadership. So we have like 8 minutes because Chris, we need to let him go about 5 to 1. So there are 5 of you that have questions. And so if you could just think right now to condense those questions and kind of make them as, quick fire as you can. So we'll go Jody, then Lindsay, then Andrew, then Sherwin, and then Michael, you said you had a question too. All right, so that's the order, and let's just kind of quickly roll through these, and then we'll wrap up.
Hi, Chris. I was just curious, what is your hope for the future in athletics? Because there's lots of changes coming down the road, but I guess what are you hoping for?
It's a lot of changes coming down the road. I think it's important to provide scholar athletes with the ability. I'm all for name, image, likeness. I'm all for NIL. We have kids here that are fantastic trumpet players that if they get the opportunity to go hit a jazz set down in Charlotte, they should and get paid for it. And they do. And what if we had an athlete, right, in the same boat? They couldn't. What if we had an athlete that was just funny as heck and wanted to do a comedy set? Like, they should be able to and get compensated for it, right? Like, I am all for it. So I think greater flexibility around scholar athletes and the ability to use their name, image, likeness. I think the pay-to-play piece is a little trickier, and it's going to flesh itself out in interesting ways depending on how the Alston case continues to be adjudicated. I think I want to see greater equity across the women's side. I know I'm facing it right now just with our scholarship levels. We are not a full scholarship program. We've only got 1, maybe 2 full scholarship teams here, and I think there's more needs to be done in that space to create greater equity with. And you're seeing now teams cut sports, and it's really hurting the scholar athletes. And it's really because programs have put themselves in the position where they haven't thought carefully about kind of repercussions and investing too much in certain programs. So I don't know. I think greater flexibility with scholar athletes. I think the NCAA model needs to shift. Putting $1 billion in the NCAA March Madness and not having it, and you're seeing the repercussions now. All your eggs in one basket. The college football playoff's separate. That's not NCAA, but the NCAA is struggling right now, right? Like, there will be March Madness. It may be April Madness or May or June, but it's like there will be a tournament played. Like, that's a hard thing to have to kind of bank on. And so I think there are a number of issues. I think that the hard part is just, you've got COVID, you've got everything else. That stuff's still coming on the line. It's not slowing down. So how are you going to react to it and be prepared and be nimble? That's the toughest thing to be prepared for. So.
Hey, Chris. So I just know with the whole George Floyd and all that was happening in June, it kind of hit, I work in football at Clemson, and it kind of hit our athletes in a different way. I was just wondering, with you being a leader and an athletic director, how were you able to handle the people that weren't really bought into what you felt was necessary being a Black man, and also what you felt was right for your players?
Still handling it. There are people who it's just, that why are we doing this? Why do we need to do DEI training? What's the purpose? What's the point? It's case by case basis. The majority of our scholar athletes have been great. I think people are starting to realize, and truly, this time feels different. I tell people, Martin Luther King III is still visible today and active and preaching for racial and social justice and equality, and it's 60 some odd years after his father was assassinated for the same thing. Like, it feels like we've been here before. And the question that I tell people that they have to ask themselves is like, what are you willing to give up? Because people have not been willing to give up enough to move things forward. Are you willing to give up time, energy, relationships with family, with friends, with teammates, with classmates? And so those are the questions that we've posed to our scholar athletes, to our coaches. Like, what are you willing to give up in order to make change? There are still kids, and it's few and far between. Part of it's from their upbringing, and they're like, is this really necessary? Does systemic racism really exist? Yeah, and here are the numbers to prove it. Here's why. And so it's a conversation that continues to evolve. There are certain people that you're just not going to change their minds, and if you're a coach and your program and you have you just got to move forward, right? At the end of the day, there's still sport to be played, and you move forward as best you can. But for those that are really trying to help understand, I think it's better when it's a part of, again, the work that you consistently do, and it's not coming up when it's convenient, right? Like if you're consistently having conversations around these topics, your scholar athlete's going to be better served for it. You don't have to talk about it every single day, but it's got to always somewhat be top of mind and have them think about how things are manifested and see themselves in different ways. There's an incredible article on Inside Higher Ed today that talked about the things that need to be done for Black college students before they get to college, and the inequities that exist, and it all ties, systemically tied, and the numbers are stark. Like, you can't argue with numbers, right? And so just helping people understand that these issues are real. It's a 400+ year problem, and that's okay. Like, we need to also be comfortable to talk about it. Talking about these things, you're not going to change your identity. You're not going to change sort of an institution in your program. You're actually going to fulfill and be the best version of yourself because of it, right? Pitching it in a way in which this is not black or white or political race. It's about decency and respect at its core. So I think when you try to simplify it as much as possible, you're more successful, especially with those that are a little more stubborn and hard-headed. You're not going to change everybody, though. Some people are just, it is what it is. You got to be able to let go.
Thank you.
I think, Andrew, you were up next.
You can go, Jen. I'll go right up to the wire.
Hey, Chris, thanks for being with us today. So my question is kind of in regards to COVID and during the pandemic with all this going on, what tools, skills, and maybe experiences have you been reliant on to make decisions that have impacted your entire athletic department during this time?
Full crisis mode. I think it's the biggest thing that we've leaned on is flexibility and being nimble, because like, you make decisions and things change just like that. Look at college games that are being canceled, football games that are being canceled, postponed, and it's like the best laid plans. And so the flexibility and adaptability are huge. Also, the biggest thing I tell our coaches and our staff, creating certainty within uncertainty is really hard. Like, our coaches have to be okay not having all the answers. And it's really hard because we're creatures of habit. Like, when we're cold, we put a sweater on. When we're hot, we take a shirt off. Like, we like comfort, we like structure, we like knowing. And COVID does not provide that, and you have to be okay with that. There's there's no other way to put it. We're not in control. We can control our response. We can try to be as proactive as possible and put guardrails in place, but there's certain things that we can't control. You have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with not having your schedule set. You have to be okay with having a schedule set knowing it's going to change. Flexibility, adaptability, embracing the uncertainty, and realizing that structure sometimes goes out the window. That's, in my mind, full crisis mode, and understanding that at every level has been a big piece of how we try to move forward.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Sherwin, then Michael.
I want to be really brief. You're talking about abbreviations and things. I have one that's called SAW. Someone's always watching. How do you mitigate the risk of your athletes representing you in a negative way?
You're never off. I think, we're one of those few institutions, we don't have our last names on the back of our jerseys. It's just Davidson. You're always representing the institution. One of the things we tell our athletes right now, especially in COVID, we are different. We are an exception, right? We're training in some instances without masks, like not socially distant. Our men's basketball team, women's basketball team, they're getting tested twice a week. It's about to be 3 when the season starts. We're following NCAA resocialization guidelines. Like, it's different, right? People are looking at us on the outside in. And so we realize and understand that we're an exception, but as soon as you step off the field, off the court, out of the pool, you got to follow the rules to a T. And there is no exception. And so I think understanding that you're always representing a team, the accountability is critically important, right? The understanding and representing what athletics means and the power that it has, for good and for bad, is just always consistently with our scholar athletes. We make mistakes; they're going to make mistakes, and that's fine. Don't make the same mistakes twice, and help them understand that when we talk about teamwork, is one of our core values. You're really being an ambassador. You have to understand athletics is not a right; it's a privilege, right? Uncle Ben Parker told Peter Parker, Spider-Man, right? With great power comes great responsibility, and athletes have a lot of power. They're just different. They're an exception. There's student athletes, there's scholar athletes, but they have a lot of power, and there's a lot of privilege that comes with that, and they've got to own that and realize that that goes with them every single moment of every single day. And so that's got to be always the little Sherwin on their shoulder every single day, right? That they're listening to. I'm a comic book head, so that's why I always reference comics.
Hey, Chris, appreciate you for your time. You have answered a lot of questions, but my question for you, that you've been in this position for 3 years, where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Now that you've learned everything, from the NBA and then having like 3 years up under your belt as a collegiate AD?
This might be it. I joke. I mean, I don't have any. I only would have left the NBA for this. I don't think I would have been an AD at any other school. And right now, I don't know if I can see myself going to another school. I say that also saying I didn't think I was going to leave the NBA per se. Like, my job was to be in the league office and then jump ship to a team and try to be a head of pro personnel or be an assistant GM. I didn't ever think I'd be in college athletics, and here I am. So you never know. But for me right now, I see so much unfinished business. And you mentioned I've learned a lot, but I have so much more to learn. And so my goal is to get us to be the best version of ourselves. If I ever get us to that point, which you're never going to be the best version of yourself. We all know it's the process. It's never the end. And so for me, I'm always going to consistently push to do more. So I see myself here for the long term. My wife's from Winston-Salem. She's a Carolina grad. Her mom moved down here. Like, we're packing in for the long haul, man. So my goal right now is to be here for as long as I can. And we'll see. I don't see myself jumping to another school, but if it happens, great. But I want to be here to make Davidson the best possible version of itself, and that's my focus for now. So.
Well, I'm here to help you do that any way I can. So, Chris, thank you so much. This was informative and inspirational. I mean, I don't know. I have like several pages of notes. I really appreciate it. How is Maisie doing?
She's great. She's great. She's my little almost two-year-old. She's a swing, like I'd say stretch 4. She's nice. Still 100% off the charts, solid weight. She's long. So we're looking good. Stretch 4, like.
I'll email you for your home address. So.
Yeah. She ain't. Hey, Shimmy, she ain't coming there. She going to Davidson. She locked in. You know what it is.
I am torn. All right, Chris.
Yeah, Janice, share my email if any folks have follow-up or want to reach out. Happy to connect.
Yeah, I have a feeling that'll happen. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate your time. Great.
No worries. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Yes.